It was a chilly Friday evening when I first met Brian, the assistant to my wife's boss. The encounter was as unexpected as the chain of events it triggered. I was waiting at a coffee shop near my workplace, killing time before heading home. Brian recognized me from a company party and hesitantly approached. His face betrayed a mix of guilt and urgency. "Hi, you're Alex, right? Maria's husband?" he asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. I nodded, surprised. "Yeah, that's me. You work with her?" "I do." I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something I think you should know," he said, sitting down across from me without waiting for an invitation. Alarm bells began ringing in my head. "What is this about?" Brian looked around nervously before leaning in. "Maria's been involved with someone. Someone she shouldn't be." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My stomach churned, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my brow. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, as if considering whether to proceed. Then he took out his phone and hesitated again before pressing play on a video. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking the people in it. Maria and her boss, Robert, were locked in an intimate embrace, their actions leaving no room for doubt. I stared at the screen, numb. My mind raced with a storm of emotions: betrayal, anger, disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Maria and I had been married for 8 years. We'd built a life together, shared dreams, and planned for the future. How could she do this to us? "Why are you showing me this?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling. Brian sighed. "I've worked for Robert for years, and I've seen him ruin lives before. He's manipulative and doesn't care about anyone but himself. When I found out about this, I couldn't just stand by. You deserve to know the truth." I sat back, struggling to process the revelation. Part of me wanted to storm out, confront Maria, and demand answers. But another part of me knew I needed to approach this carefully. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "I'll deal with it." The drive home was a blur. I replayed the video in my mind, each frame like a dagger to my heart. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I was no closer to understanding why Maria had done this. Maria greeted me with a warm smile as I walked in. "Hey, honey. How was your day?" she asked, her tone cheerful and oblivious. I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "It was fine. How about you?" "Busy as usual," she replied, kissing me on the cheek. Her touch felt foreign, almost repulsive. Over the next few days, I observed her closely. She seemed normal, her behavior giving no indication of guilt or deceit. But the video was undeniable. I decided to gather more evidence before confronting her. I hired a private investigator, a decision that felt both drastic and necessary. The investigator's findings confirmed my worst fears. Maria and Robert had been meeting at a hotel every Thursday afternoon under the guise of work meetings. The betrayal cut even deeper knowing how much effort she'd put into deceiving me. When I finally confronted her, it was late one evening. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when I placed the printed photos and a USB containing the video on the coffee table. Her face turned pale as she looked at the evidence. "What is this?" she stammered. "You tell me," I replied, my voice cold and steady. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized there was no denying it. "Alex, I can explain," she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said firmly. "You made a choice, Maria. A choice that destroyed everything we built together." She broke down, sobbing and apologizing, but her words felt hollow. I had loved her deeply, but the trust was shattered beyond repair. After a long, painful conversation, we agreed to separate. The night she moved out was one of the darkest moments of my life. I sat in our empty living room, staring at the vacant spaces where her belongings used to be. The silence was deafening, each second a reminder of the life we'd lost. Anger consumed me, and I found myself smashing a photo frame that once held a picture of our wedding day. The glass shattered, much like the illusions I'd held onto for so long. The divorce process was agonizing, filled with moments of doubt and sadness. Each meeting with the lawyers felt like reopening a wound that refused to heal. Maria's attempts to reconcile were met with my cold resolve. She begged for forgiveness, sent me long letters filled with memories of happier times, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The scars she'd left were too deep. As the weeks turned into months, I found solace in new routines. I picked up hobbies I'd neglected over the years, like painting and hiking. Rediscovering these passions gave me a sense of purpose and a renewed zest for life. I also started therapy, which provided a safe space to process my emotions and rebuild my confidence. My therapist, a kind but firm woman named Dr. Lang, helped me navigate the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. I learned to cherish the small victories. Like making it through a day without dwelling on the past or finding joy in a sunrise during a morning hike. Each step forward felt like a triumph, a reminder that life could still be beautiful despite the pain, but life wasn't without its moments of raw confrontation. One day, Maria showed up at my door, unannounced. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and she clutched a box of keepsakes from our life together. She wanted closure, she said, but her presence only reopened old wounds. I listened as she poured out her heart, her voice trembling with regret. Yet, as much as her tears stirred my emotions, I knew there was no going back. I handed her the box and wished her well, closing the door on that chapter of my life for good. As for Maria, I heard she eventually left her job and moved to another city. She sent me a letter once, apologizing again and expressing regret for her actions. I read it, but I didn't reply. Her words, while sincere, couldn't undo the damage or change the past. I chose to focus on my future instead of dwelling on what was lost. Months later, I attended a friend's party and met someone new. Her name was Emily, and she had a warm smile and an infectious laugh. We started talking, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of hope. While I wasn't ready to rush into anything, I allowed myself to enjoy her company and the possibility of something new. Looking back, the experience of betrayal was devastating, but it also taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of honesty in relationships. I've come to understand that life's trials can shape us in ways we never imagined, leading us to paths we might not have chosen otherwise. What matters now is that I've found peace and am ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold.